Welcome to CoffeeIs.me podcast, where me means you, or more precisely, us. This is the show where your host, Valerian, without using any interrogation techniques, convinces coffee professionals to reveal their secrets to teach and inspire you to make better coffee and earn a few bucks on the side, if that's what you fancy. Let the show begin.
Hello coffee lovers, welcome to CoffeeIs.me podcast. I'm your host, Valerian Hrala. In the next 3 episodes, I'm inviting you to a very special journey. We are going to launch a coffee roasting company. My guest, Ryan O'Rourke, is starting the Ironclad Coffee Roasters in Richmond, Virginia. There's a lot of preparation and work before you launch a coffee roasting company, and Ryan was kind enough to share some of these steps. I decided to divide the interview into 3 parts. Yes, my friends, 3 parts. There's a lot of valuable information Ryan shared, and I do not want you to miss any of it. In this, the first episode, we will talk about the coffee aspects of his venture. Ryan will tell us why did he decide to start a coffee roasting company. He will share what kind of roaster did he choose and what were the main criteria for selecting that roaster. He will also talk about coffee importers and his coffee portfolio and shares many more thoughts a future coffee business owner should consider. In the second episode, Ryan will talk about how is he going to establish his brand. He will give us few tips how to select your name and how to get a logo on budget, perhaps even for $5. We will also talk about my personal obsession, and that's web design and social media. With Ryan, we will discuss what kind of social media you can utilize in your business, what kind of website to build, and even what kind of plugins to use for building your web store. This episode will be useful not only for coffee roasters, but any small business trying to succeed in the digital age. In the final part, part 3, Ryan will tell us his experience with raising money with crowdfunding platform like Indiegogo. Ryan raised respectful $6,000, which would help him to start his business. He will give us very useful tips how to start and what mistakes to avoid to have a successful crowdfunding campaign. These 3 episodes are essential for everyone who is thinking to start a coffee roasting venture or is just interested how does a coffee roasting startup think and what are their challenges. If you like this show, leave us a review on iTunes so I know what you like or not. I want to know, I need to know, so please keep them coming. Your reviews and good coffee, of course, keeps me going. Thank you so much. Before we start, here is a small message from our sponsor.
This show is brought to you by Bootcamp Coffee, online education for coffee roasters and professionals. Subscribe to bootcampcoffee.com today and unlock the quality of your coffee.
Disclaimer, I'm co-founder of Bootcamp Coffee, but the show is independent. We are open to any third-party advertisers. Okay, let the show begin. Enjoy! Hi Ryan, welcome to my podcast. You're my first guest, by the way, so this will be very special.
Cool, yep.
I had Willem before, but that was just kind of like a test or kind of playing around. But you are my first official guest, so welcome.
Well, I'm honored, thank you.
I'm honored too. So what's your background story? Why did you start to deal with coffee?
Well, I have been a coffee consumer, a drinker of coffee, I guess since early on in my college years. And then, just kind of naturally learning about coffee little by little. But then in 2005, my parents opened a coffee shop, a cafe and bakery, a specialty coffee shop and bakery. And because they were close by at the time, I was able to learn the professional side of it. I went in and helped with things from time to time, actually quite often, as often as I could, just because I began enjoying that and seeing the professional side of it and learning more and more about specialty coffee. So that was the real, the big aha moment, the big catalyst to helping me want to learn more about coffee. And it took me kind of to the next level from just casual coffee consumer to really, really interested in the business side of the specialty coffee world. So I guess you could say that was the big moment in my past.
Where was this shop? Was it in the United States?
That was in the United States. Yep. That was in Tennessee, a small town, Mayberry-like town in Middle Tennessee is where that was. And they did a very, very good job with it. Kind of did everything right, did their research. Because my dad is not even really a coffee drinker. My mom is. He was more interested in the bakery side of it, but they wanted to bring in the fine coffee side of it as well. And so at that time, I was not much of a resource myself because I just didn't know that much. But I kind of learned along with them. So that was Middle Tennessee, and really that was the only game in town for a really nice coffee shop.
So what happened then? Did you have to escape to Ireland from the coffee, or?
Yeah, we decided to, actually in between our living in Tennessee and Ireland, we moved to Richmond, Virginia for about 5 years and really loved that place. But then we had an opportunity to pack up and move to Ireland for a few reasons, one of which was to do some ministry work with a church and really just kind of start a church in the west of Ireland. And so that's what we've been doing, part of what we've been doing at least for the last 4.5 years. But now it's time to move on from that, and so now it's back to Richmond, the place we lived before we came to Ireland. We'll be returning to Richmond in just about a couple months, and coming back to the place that we loved so much.
When did you start to be interested in coffee, and did you start to roast, or did you just drink coffee?
Just drank coffee and learned the finer points of all the brewing techniques and the importance of good coffee to start with, and from a pretty good roaster, not what I'd call maybe a great roaster. Looking back and what I know now, it was a decent roaster, but not a great roaster for what my standards and what my tastes are now. But and then just the business side of it as well. But he hired a manager who had some experience, a small bit of experience in the specialty coffee world himself. And I was able to actually learn a lot from him and then just pick up things, self-taught sort of things as the years went on.
So do you roast now?
I do roast now, and I did not roast at that time. That was well advanced of where I was at that time. But I started roasting only about 1.5 years ago, and it came about really as a necessity. It wasn't even just like hey, this is something I want to pick up and try. It was like, Ireland has a long way to go, in my opinion, as far as the specialty coffee world. It's coming on in small steps, but it's got a long way to go for specialty coffee. There are a few roasters around now. There's a few really good cafes coming up, but it's still got a ways to go. So at that time, about 2 years ago, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I just realized I couldn't get really great specialty coffee the way I wanted it roasted without ordering from the UK at that time, and which I had been doing for a little while, but it got a little bit impractical. So I just decided to look into what was involved with home roasting, and I started out in a popcorn popper, but the ambient temperature in Ireland, in our house in winter, in the part of our house that I could use because of ventilation purposes, the ambient temperature was not warm enough, so that was not working for me at all. So after a few attempts on the popcorn popper, I went ahead and ordered a Jenna Cafe. I think that's how you say that. Some people say Gene Cafe. I think it's actually supposed to be Jenna Cafe. But that's what I ordered, and that's what I've been roasting on since. Been fairly happy with it. I know, learning more and more about roasting over the past 12 months or so, it has a woeful lack of controls as far as what I'm going to be getting into in the professional world, but that's okay. It's been a good teaching tool for me. It's been something good for me to start on, and it's been a good foundation, that little machine.
So you basically learned roasting by trial and error, or did you use some resources for that?
I trial and error a bit at first, and it came with some instructions from the company I bought it from, which was my first real little kind of instruction on home roasting. But then after that, I just wasn't really satisfied with that, so I just went looking everywhere and anywhere online for resources and videos and coffee courses and all sorts of stuff. So, just step by step, baby steps along the way, I just kept learning and learning and learning, to the point now where I realize, I've long since outgrown that roaster because I know what I need to be doing. It's just now the limits of the controls and the data collection points are just so limited on that machine that I've really just outgrown that machine. So I'm looking forward to getting rid of that one and getting to the big time professional machines now. And I know that'll be a learning curve as well, of course, but I'm ready for it.
Speaking of professional machines, the reason why I invited to this show as one of the first guests is because I know you are going to start a coffee company, and you are going through processes which many of us who already have coffee roasting companies or dealing with coffee, we forgot. We simply maybe remember a little bit, but you are into this right now, so you can tell us what do you have to do in order to start a coffee roasting company. So that's why I want to pick your brain. And once we are speaking about the coffee roasters, tell me more about what coffee roaster did you pick and how did you choose it?
I elected to go with a U.S. Roasters Corporation, U.S. Roaster Corps, 12 kg, the Millennium model. I had my eye on their Revelation model, which is kind of the cream of the crop, the Rolls Royce of their roasters, but it was a bit out of our price range as just a startup with, given everything else that we have to be spending money on. That I really had my eye on that. The environmentally friendly aspect of it, as well as the energy savings, really looks like a great roaster. But this is the scaled down version of that, and I chose them after thinking about a lot of different roasting machine companies and checking them all out. And based on everything that I researched and lots of people that I talked with, it sounded like this one was kind of for me at least, the best combination of, I guess, quality and features and value for money. There's tons of good, several good makers out there for roasting machines, but this was the one that I felt was the best combination of all those factors.
Who were the main contenders for you?
Well, Diedrich was there. I was thinking I wanted something made in America, just because that's something I'm passionate about. Not to the exclusion. I mean, if something is better and is competitive in price, I'll definitely shop around and consider foreign-made machines. And I know, of course, Probat and Gießen and all these are great machines as well. But I did like the fact that it's all made in America. Also, I had a chance to talk a lot with Dan, the head man over there at U.S. Roasters in Oklahoma City, and he was just super, super responsive and fired back on emails, almost right away every time. So that gave me a really good feeling that, hey, if something, probably not if something, whenever something does go wrong, because hopefully we'll be using this thing like a workhorse. Whenever something does go wrong, that gives me a good feeling that he'll get right back with me, and send me the part or whatever needs to be done in short order so that I'm not, losing roasting time, basically. So, yeah, I guess that was one of the biggest things, actually, customer service.
That's something very interesting when it comes to coffee roasters. When I was buying my first new coffee roaster, and it was in 2012, I had a horrible time communicating with roasting companies. I don't know, they just didn't answer the emails. I don't know why, but that's actually a good thing to hear that, they do so. The most famous is probably Probat. I mean, they did not even bother to answer my email. So it's that was weird.
Exactly. Yeah, I ran into a bit of that with a couple of the companies as well, and things I'd heard good things about, but then, when they don't answer the email, and we're talking about several days or even weeks or not at all, even one company that came fairly highly recommended to me, they didn't answer me ever. So I was just like, well, that's an easy decision right there.
Let's name that company. I mean, let's just, this is a podcast where I want to help people to understand how the business works. So, let's just,
Yeah. Okay. That company was Ambex in Florida. And I was considering them for a few reasons. Some good recommendations from some folks who are using them. Number one, but I know they wouldn't be a super high end roaster, but I guess price point is pretty good. But I also considered them because I'm from Florida originally, and we have family down there, so we're going to be down there, from time to time. So I could duck in there to their manufacturing or their offices or whatever if I needed to from time to time. So that was some reasons I was considering them. But then when they didn't contact me back at all, that would be a nightmare. I have a feeling, because if they're not even going to answer my emails when I'm trying to buy something from them, well, then we know what it's going to be like if something goes wrong and I need a part or they've done something defectively or So that was a no-brainer there.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I mean, naming this company, maybe it helps for them to realize that there are guys who want to buy the roasters from them, and they just should answer the emails.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important, really.
Did you have a chance to try out that coffee roaster, or you picked it just solely based on the features you saw online or whatever documentation you got?
Yeah, this is kind of the unique predicament, challenging situation that I'm in, because I'm here in Ireland, mm-hmm. and I've got to be able to, as much as possible, at least, kind of hit the ground running when I get back to the U.S. because, income and I got to get churning and making some money at this business. So I didn't have the luxury. We're going to be back in the U.S. in about a month and a half, 2 months. And I don't have the luxury to just sit around when I get back there and just try as many of these roasters as possible, and then wait another 6 to 8 weeks for the roasting company to make the roaster. I would just be, depleting our savings, and mm-hmm. that would have been basically impossible. So I had to do everything I could here in Ireland from a distance to just do my homework, ask as many people as possible, roasting on all these machines, and getting a feel for these companies through emails and these sorts of things. And I feel really, really good that we've made the right decision going with Dan and the guys at US Roaster in Oklahoma City. So as good as you can without actually trying it out. But I know just from talking to people, this is going to be good.
That's a great point there. So you asked for references. Is that correct?
Tons of references. Uh-huh. Yes. I talked to quite a few people who are using various versions and models of their machines, and no one had anything but great things to say about them, and everywhere I looked, even on message boards, people who are making comments and talking about their machines, just, nearly 100% singing their praises. So without it being an ideal situation of being able to have the time to try all these roasters out, that would obviously be ideal, but I don't have that luxury in my situation. So I had to do it a bit blindly and just trust the overwhelming evidence that these guys know what they're doing.
No, I think most of the roasters do not have a chance to try out the roasters, because it's not like you have a roaster everywhere.
That's
and
right.
Even if you have to kind of trust that the guy lets you in, right? Because he or she is going to be your competitor, so maybe they don't want to share their knowledge about those roasters. We have people like that in the industry, so I think the best thing is probably to ask for those references. And if you are lucky, you go to a fair, and, on a fair, I don't even think that you can really try them out, because I think, if you go to a SCA event, those roasters are there, but they cannot use them. Otherwise they smoke up
That's right. Yeah.
the place. Yeah. References. I did the same, by the way. When we restarted in 2012, we started with Turkish roasters simply because of the budget. That was the only reason. And, it's a good starter roaster. Not great, but good. And then we asked for references, and we got this, if I compare the references, what we got from those guys, like, their opinions about these roasters, and I can compare them to my opinion today, 5 years later, I can say that, 3 years later, I can say that, they were right. They are not great roasters, but they are very good starting roasters. So,
yeah. Yeah. I think if you ask enough people, you're going to get a pretty accurate assessment of what a roaster's like. I mean, if you ask one or two, it's probably not enough. But if you ask 15, 20, 25 people, that's, your sample size is, you're going to get a good idea of what the roaster's like.
So what size roaster did you choose?
I chose the 12 kilogram. I think I was given wise counsel on that because, larger than that, probably not going to be at that capacity for a little while. Although if we are, that's a good problem. Okay. If we grew out of that quickly, that's a good problem to have. But then, of course, and this made total sense to me, of course, getting something that's too small that you're going to outgrow, almost certainly, like a 5 kg or something like that even, you're probably, if you're doing things the right way, you're going to outgrow that really quickly. And I heard that time and time and time again, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So 12 kind of seemed like the sweet spot for me. So that was the model we went with, the 12 kilogram Millennium roaster from U.S. Roaster Corp.
That's interesting that you say that, because I'm just writing an article about how to select a coffee roaster for your business. And obviously, I'm not a professional in this, so I kind of discuss this with other guys, what is their opinion. And time to time, I get these guys who are thinking to start roasting, and they are looking into 1 kilo roasters. And I always say, that's a suicide. That's 1 kilo roaster will cost you a lot of money, and it will not give you any normal production. But they go like, oh yeah, but we want to do, freshly roasted coffee. I said, yes, but don't you want to also do business? Because I think if you are serious about your business, to sell 12 kilos of coffee, it should not be a big deal, right? You don't have to roast every hour of the week. It's okay if you roast 1 day a week or even less, but you have to sell your coffee, right? So I don't know. I find that, there's a lot of there are a lot of guys there who want these 1 kilo roasters, and I think that's just a suicide. And the price difference between 1 kilo roaster and a 5 kilo, which is probably the smallest I would recommend for a business, is very small. It's like $2,000. So
yeah, that's what I was running into as well. I mean, even a sample roaster, what one of those costs you, like, versus the what a 12 kilogram roaster is. It's huge. I mean, to me, it just didn't make any sense to go any smaller than like a 10 kg. But U.S. Roaster Corp, that their size at that level was a 12 kg. So I thought that was really good. And I think I was also considering the San Franciscan, which is a great reputation as well. Bill from San Franciscan did a really great job of communicating with me as well. One of the main considerations there for me, though, was that it automatically comes with an afterburner, which I don't need yet in Virginia, in Richmond. And that was, of course, a huge cost add-on, as well as huge gas usage and utility investment as well. So I'm hoping, though, within a few years, we will be able to upgrade to like an 18 kg with the Revelation model that U.S. Roasters makes, where it's just so efficient and so environmentally friendly. That's what we're hoping, that we've outgrown the 12 kg in just a few years and step up to that Revelation model next.
Sounds great. I think it was a smart choice.
Yeah.
Can you tell the price? Is that official or?
Yeah, we paid. Now we added on a few things. Okay, so I think the base price was around $25,000 for that, but we added on a few things, a couple cosmetic things, but then a few performance, things as well. So that brought us in right in at $30,000 for it.
Great, thank you for this input. I mean, I hope this will help for many beginners to kind of pick their roasters.
Yeah,
I think that you did a smart choice. You made your research. I love the fact that you are loyal to your country and kind of went local. That's always a plus, because you actually hope that people will, choose your coffee, right? So
yeah, exactly. I'm kind of passionate about those sorts of things, going local. So that was about as local, I think, as I could have gone on the roaster, minus the one in Florida, although that was similarly local to U.S. Roasters. But since they didn't respond to my emails, that was an easy choice.
Cool. So let's talk about coffee importers. So did you start already negotiating with them?
Not too much negotiation so far. Nothing too detailed. Simply because we're at least 2 to 2.5 months at least away from firing up the roaster and starting roasting. So it's a bit far out to start with that, I think, from what I've been told by them so far. But I have gotten price lists of where they are now and got an idea of the kind of things they all have, on offer on a rotating basis. And so I've checked out quite a few of those. And by the way, thanks for your list of listing all the coffee importers in the U.S. That was very helpful, actually.
Oh, thanks. By the way, it's a list of the world importers. So
Oh, is it on the world? Okay,
Yeah, you can find Europeans there too. So,
yes,
you know,
I guess I was focusing on the U.S. ones, obviously. So
yeah.
yeah, so that list was helpful for me in that way. And so ones I'm really looking at the most at the moment are Cafe Imports, Royal, as well as Mercanta. I'm looking at a little bit at the Balzac Brothers in South Carolina. And then also, is it Coffee Shrub is the name of the website? Yeah, the smaller kind of micro lots and these sorts of things. Their prices are a bit higher because of some of those things, but they've sure got some interesting offerings there. So I'm keeping an eye on those guys.
Coffee Shrub is a wholesale for Sweet Marias. I don't know if you know Sweet Marias.
Yeah. I kind of figured there was something like that.
Yeah, I got some. I get a lot of coffee from Sweet Marias, and I got some lot. Once I got a lot from Coffee Shop because I needed more coffee, and yeah, it was awesome. It was very, very nice. I got the European Cochere.
Yeah, really, really interesting coffees that at any given time there. And then also, I watched your Periscope broadcast the other day with 90 Plus. I'd never heard of those guys, but that's a really interesting thing they're doing there. And of course, high dollar stuff. But
I just got their price list. It's even more expensive than I thought.
Yikes! Yeah, I mean it's innovative stuff. I can tell they're doing there, so that's cool. But what we're kind of, I think our strategy is going to be, if we start off with all super high dollar stuff to begin with, I think we're going to maybe scare some people away. So my strategy, at least, and I'm sure this is not groundbreaking, I'm sure I'm not the first one who's thought about this, is to kind of offer a range, at first at least, with some more budget items. Nothing junky, nothing, nothing less than, nice. But some lower end items and lower end coffees, and then some moderately priced coffees, and then maybe at any given time one or two nicer high end, maybe not 90 plus high end at first, but it'd be nice to eventually work up to having that one coffee from like a 90 plus really super duper high end stuff at any given time for those who are so disposed to spend a lot more on their coffee.
Well, this brings me to another question, is your business. Like, what is your business model? What kind of coffees do you want to offer? And if you can give us examples, because, for somebody, the lower end, higher end means something else than for you. So can you just tell us example? What do you plan to sell? What kind of price range you plan to do?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to go with the 12 ounce or 340 gram bags of coffee. I think that kind of seems like the standard these days, and I figured we'd fall in line with that. I know some people still sell the 16 ounce, the full pound bags of coffee, and that's good. But it seems like a lot of our competitors, most of our competitors, that is, are going with the 12 ounce bag. So I figured we may as well fall in line with that. But I think as far as like a budget item, things like your basic Costa Rica Terrazus and Ethiopia Harars and things that are nothing that's too terribly exotic, something that's easily enough gotten and is not a super high dollar amount for those coffees. And then in the middle, I guess I've not really thought about too much about what would be moderate, but I really love African coffees. Would be my top coffees, just because, and I do prefer naturally processed coffees. When I started drinking coffee, and when my parents first had that shop, they would offer Sumatras, they would offer Guatemalas, they would offer Kenyas, Ethiopias, and my palate was so unrefined, and I don't want to sound snobby here either, because I always try to walk the line between between coffee snob and total bumpkin as far as coffees go. It can be a fine line, and I don't want to be either. So I want to find a happy medium. But my palate at that time was so unrefined, so uneducated, just really bland, that all I wanted were the very kind of plain Jane Sumatras with very no acidity, because my palate was not trained. When I tried the Kenyans and Ethiopias, it just repelled me way too much for my palate at that time. But over the years, over the last 10 years, 8 to 10 years, I can't stand the Sumatras. They're just too boring for me. And no offense to anyone that likes those. If that's what you like, that's what you like. But for me now, it's just, I want interesting. I want, pizzazz. I want acidity. I want fruitiness. I want all these crazy flavors in my coffee. And the more I get of it, the more interesting it is, the better for me. So that's where I am now. So I really want to focus a lot on naturally processed stuff and things that have a really unique flavor profile.
It's interesting that you say that, because it was kind of my story. I always say that I restarted my company in 2012. And it's true, because I actually started to roast in 2002. I came back from a diplomatic mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. And I started to do exactly what you said. It was a Sumatra, dark roast, low acidity, just, basically having chocolate in your cup. Nothing. Exactly. Yeah. No, it has to have a coffee flavor. That's all what you're looking for.
Yeah, smoky chocolate. Yeah,
exactly. So in 2012, what happened is, it was actually in 2011. I moved here into California in 2010, and I was invited by a company called Equator Coffees and Teas, and they had a public cupping. So I came there, and I was tasting their coffees, and they had one which was really weird. It was like, what the heck is this? It's like, it tastes like strawberries, but it's, at this time I could not name that it's strawberries. I was just like, this is weird. This is seriously weird. And I pointed out and said, this is a defect. And a guy who was doing the cupping, he was like, no, this is actually one of the most expensive coffees we have. And it was Ethiopian Ekise from 90 plus. So I was like, nice. So, and I am a guy who likes to experiment, and I was like, let me have an open mind with this. So I started to buy coffees from Sweet Marius, and I started to experiment with the naturals. I was like, this is a new coffee world, and I love it. I want to do this. So that's why we basically always say that we restarted in 2012, because we started to do the light roast, we started to look for unique lots, and we kind of rebranded. We just decided, we tossed away the dark roast. We'd never do that again.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I wanted was dark roasts, and I had the whole the lexicon of the bold, this sort of thing, and that word bold, I thought that was like the dark roast that was equated with bold, and Starbucks, that was I was all about Starbucks at first too, and then I just I wanted to give a shout out too to a company from the UK. I mentioned that I when I moved to Ireland, I couldn't really find much within Ireland, but I went to the UK, at least went to UK websites and found a great roaster. And you probably know the name of the roaster is Has Been.
Oh yeah,
in the UK.
Of course.
Yeah. And I came across them, and I signed up to his Stephen's subscription program, and that really, and this was 3 years ago, only 3.5 years ago. So I've learned so much in just the last 3.5 years, and his rotating selections through the In My Mug subscription program that he runs, that's where I just began, like you were talking about there with that Ethiopian you tried, and then we're experimenting. He was my vehicle. He was what provided me the ability to just try all these different coffees from all these different places and start tasting through his descriptions of the coffees, and then tasting it myself. That's where it really started to click for me, and my palate just went from plain Jane smoked chocolate to now just all these different crazy flavors. And he calls the naturally processed coffees, he calls them funky, which I think is a good word. So I like the funky stuff. And thanks to him now, thanks to Stephen at Has Been, he's been maybe without him even knowing it, he's been a huge mentor for me in wanting to do this. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. I mean, it's funny, but for me, the most serious competitors in Slovakia, for my business in Slovakia, are actually Has Been and Barn, which is a company in Berlin. So
yeah.
So
there's a cafe in here in Galway where I live in Ireland now. Brand new cafe. They just started serving Barn, and I've not tried that yet. But they also serve Coffee Collective, which I'm real impressed with. But I've not had the Barn yet.
Yeah, Barn are very big in Europe, and they came out of nowhere. I don't think they were roasting when we were roasting. Well, anyhow, they do it well. They deserve all the credit, right?
Yeah.
All right, so back to your business. A lot of companies start just because they love to roast, and they decide that they buy the 1 kilo roaster, which we already agree that's a mistake or whatever. How do you do it? Do you have a business plan, or do you just improvise?
Yeah, I do. We put together a fairly substantial business plan going into all this with some help from some folks that I know that are in business, not coffee business specifically, but are successful businessmen in other arenas. So we have that business plan, but whether or not how closely it sticks, I'm going to go ahead and assume that as we get going, the business plan, at least huge portions of it, will fly right out the window because I can just anticipate things. You just don't know how things are going to happen. You try to plan for these things. I think we've done a good job with that, but we'll see. We'll see in about 2-3 months.
Yeah, that would be my question when we have this podcast next time, because of course we have to check how did you do. But it would be interesting to see how close you could get to your business plan, because many times you have a business plan, but you just don't keep up with that, right?
Yeah, that will be very interesting. And there was a couple guys in particular that I talked with online who kind of, he didn't give me a copy of his business plan, but he gave me a copy of his projections, just financial projections. Because and that's probably the most uncertain part of the whole thing, is the business plan is the financial projections. He gave me a good idea of what his financial projections were, and by the time he had started, and they were bigger than I thought. And I when I laid out my own financial projections, they were quite meager. So his projections, as well as some other folks that had just started their roasting businesses, the numbers they were giving me were really surprising. So I think I maybe wasn't, undershooting a little bit and maybe being a bit too pessimistic. So yeah, we've got some numbers we want to try to hit. Whether or not we hit them, maybe even exceed them, we'll see. We really just want to hit the ground running and hit as many different possible revenue streams as possible, as we can. Of course, got the web shop up, the web store, trying to sell coffee retail, trying to get as many wholesale accounts as possible, but then also see Richmond in our part of the country where we will be has tons of really, really great farmers markets and local markets. So we want to try to get into as many of those as possible, because someone told me that was a huge part of their first year sales, was actually just going to markets in person with bags of coffee and selling them that way. And that also helps you to get the word out that you're in town, new business, and drum up some customers that way.
I totally agree. This changed our life, by the way, in Slovakia. So we have, because I'm a nerd, right, a computer nerd, so I had my website on, and it was all fancy, and we did all fancy social media. But I think people have to experience your coffee, otherwise they will not trust it. So I think the farmers markets or any kind of festivals or whatever you have, those are a great way how you introduce yourself. And as a back end, you have your website where you can, when people can buy it. That's really cool. Or a store. I don't know if are you going to have a store or a cafe, or is it just a roasting?
That's one of the first questions everyone has for me, all my friends, because every time I talk to them about this coffee business I'm starting, for most of them, a coffee roastery, a standalone coffee roastery without a cafe attached, they didn't know such a thing existed, Mm-hmm. So I always have to correct them and say, no cafe at first, at least. Now, if in 3 or 4 or 5 years or however many years, it makes sense to open a cafe and the roastery is done very well, and the brand can be furthered and enhanced by adding a cafe, well then fine, we'll look at doing that. I'm not opposed to that. But if that never comes to that, that's okay too. We'll just take it as it comes.
I was thinking the same as you are. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of advantages for a cafe. Like, one is that you can present your product exactly the same way as you envision.
Yes.
So that's a big thing, because many times I experienced it here. Like, for example, I really liked Equator coffees and teas, and I went out and they were serving it in some cafe, and I got really bad coffee. And I knew it's not in the coffee, it was in the preparation. Mm. And it's the same with, with us. So we try to kind of train our wholesale customers, but you never know what you get, and they baristas are always changing, so the quality control is not there for us. So having our own cafe would be great because we can present it exactly how we want to. And second, if you do the math, you realize that in drinks you get giant profits.
Exactly.
So that the roasting is okay business, but if you roast your own beans and then you sell them and sell your drinks like espressos, lattes, whatever, it's a great profit. So we are actually looking into options how to start our own cafe, and it's very expensive, obviously, because once you invest in your roaster, that's a big budget, and suddenly you go like, oh gosh, I really need a cafe now, and that's another big budget. Basically, there are two different businesses, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the money thing is the main issue, of course, starting that up. But hopefully, if the roastery succeeds, we'll be in a position to maybe attract some investors, and my dad's been very helpful with everything and supportive, and even he's invested a lot into our business as well, and his expertise with the cafe side of it, should that come about, that will be very handy to have. So I think if we get to the point where we can do the cafe and it makes sense to do, that will be a very good sign of where we're at.
Okay, so talking more about your business plan, did you research your competition? Do you know who they are?
I did, yes. And there's only a small handful of specialty coffee roasters in Richmond, and they're good at what they do. I'm a fan of all of them, at least the ones that I've tried, which is most of them. But the thing about Richmond is Richmond over the last decade or so has become one of the premier gourmet foodie cities in the country. It's just going crazy right now. And one thing that has not yet kept up, as far as I'm concerned, my assessment of it, is coffee. It's lagged behind the rest of the beverage industry and the restaurant industry. Coffee, especially coffee's actually lagged behind a little bit. And so I think this is a really good time to be getting in to coffee roasting and to the coffee business in Richmond, Virginia.
Well, anywhere in the world, I would say, because the coffee is really hot everywhere.
Yeah, anywhere, of course, yeah. But see, we had a choice of pretty much anywhere in the country to go when we decided, we're going to move back. Realized we had to move back, and we looked at a lot of places, but Richmond was it for a lot of reasons. Not least of which was the strategic portion of it, being such a food-loving, beverage-loving city now, and relatively few roasters to service that need, that desire. I think Richmond is primed for it.
Mm-hmm. So how would you differentiate your product from, let's say, what is it? The biggest one is probably the Lamplighter there, right?
Lamplighter's very, very good. Fan of their work. I'm a fan of Blancharts as well. A couple others as well, but I think those two probably are the leaders in Richmond, and they do a very good job. Lamplighter, great stuff. Their cafe, of course, as well, serve food and all this, so they kind of got maybe a bit different approach to it. Blanchards is just roasting only, and so no cafe. So I think what I want to do to differentiate ourselves a little bit is really focus on the education side of it, the tasting side of it, and I know they do that as well, especially Blanchards. It's not like they don't do this, but I want to put a huge emphasis on teaching and workshops and creating like a community of just like you are and I am nerds. I want to train and educate nerds and do that a lot. So I think maybe that'll help set us off a little bit from some of the others.
I think that's the most fun part of the coffee roasting business, is when you talk to your customers about your passion. And it's a good excuse, to talk about your passion when you go like, oh, I'm going to make a training for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. And when we go back to Has Been, one of the things which I really liked on his videos, he makes these videos, what's in my cup?
Yeah,
and he kind
in my
of
mug.
In mug, yes. So they're kind of cool how introducing his own coffees to the customers. I think that's a great job,
He is he is great. And what I like about him, what I like about Stephen Leighton, and this is kind of who I want to model myself after in terms of walking that fine line I mentioned earlier, between too snobby and like turning people off that aren't as nerdy as we are before we have the chance to educate them, and then just being a total. I sometimes call it like a reverse snob, like you just kick against the idea that coffee is a fine thing and it is something that needs to be educated and talked about. So there's the two extremes, snobbery and reverse snobbery. But Stephen does a tremendous job of, he knows his stuff. You can tell he knows his stuff. He educates his customers about the stuff, but he doesn't take himself so seriously. He has fun with it. He jokes around. He's silly. He's sillier than I am.
He dresses in red, right?
He dresses all in red. He's naturally sillier than I am. I can tell you that. But I can have fun with it, I think. And so I want to kind of make it a blend of serious, nerdiness, but also having fun with it too. I think he does a great job with that.
Yeah, I agree. That's always fun to see him and to watch his videos. And just and one thing which he does differently than, let's say, us, is that he has much lower prices than any other specialty coffee roaster in Europe, I would say. And, we chosen, let's say, to be snobs in Slovakia, and simply not because we are such jerks or snobs or crazy people, but simply because we needed to differentiate ourselves very clearly from anything what existed in Slovakia. It was basically marketing driven, and I admit it. I always admit it. I always admit it on my Slovak podcast, and people who know us, they say, oh, okay, now we see that.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't get a sense that you guys are overly snob. I'm talking like the ones who are really snobbish, like the ones who basically look down their noses at folks and and just really turn people off. There's a temptation. There's a side of me that could happen if I'm not careful. But I need to keep that in check and keep a balance. I think just kind of like somebody like Stephen does.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
I'll be your customer.
Yeah, here we go.
You already convinced me.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Ryan gave us so much valuable information, and this is only the start. In the next episode, we'll tackle the branding, marketing, and the digital aspects of starting a coffee roasting company. Take your websites, online marketing, and social media very seriously. They can make a big difference in your sales, so do not miss the next episode. I'm also looking forward for your honest reviews on iTunes. I can't wait to read them. If you want to discuss this episode, join our closed Facebook group, coffeeis.me. I hand select each member so we can have a clean, friendly, and very useful group. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye.